It was a cold afternoon in Seattle, Washington, when Ethan Miller finally gathered the courage to push open the door to the game club. The building was tucked away at the far end of the school, hidden behind a row of tall maple trees that shivered in the breeze. Inside, the room buzzed with laughter, the clicking of controllers, and the rapid tapping of keyboards. To Ethan, it sounded like a place of belonging, a place where he might finally find his voice. But as the door creaked shut behind him, every sound seemed to fade. Heads turned. A dozen eyes examined him, as though he had stepped into forbidden territory. Ethan's grip tightened on the strap of his backpack. His heart pounded against his chest like a frantic drumbeat. At the far corner, a tall boy with sharp features smirked. His name was Brandon, the unofficial leader of the club. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and let out a short laugh. "Well, look who's here," he drawled. "The freshman who thinks he can play." Snickers rose from the room. Ethan felt the heat rushing to his face. He had expected nerves, maybe even silence, but not this immediate wave of ridicule. Another voice chimed in, higher-pitched, almost mocking. "Did you get lost, kid? The art club is down the hall." Ethan stood frozen. The words pressed on him like heavy stones. For a moment, he wanted to retreat, to disappear into the safety of the corridor. But something inside held him still. He forced a smile, though his lips trembled. "I'm here to join," he said, his voice quieter than he had hoped. The room erupted with laughter. Controllers were dropped onto tables as some of the members leaned forward, eager to watch the spectacle. Brandon rose from his chair, towering over Ethan. "You? Join us." Brandon sneered. "You'll be lucky if you last a single match." The atmosphere grew tense. Ethan's fingers curled into fists inside his pockets. Every fiber of his being told him to run, but deep down he knew he had to stay. This was not just about playing games. This was about proving he belonged somewhere. Brandon leaned closer, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Fine," he said. "Sit down. Let's see how long you last before you embarrass yourself." A hush fell across the room as Ethan walked to the empty chair in front of the glowing screen. The mocking laughter still lingered in his ears, but beyond the haze of humiliation, there was a spark. A secret he held close, something no one in that room could have imagined. And that secret was waiting, quietly, for its moment to change everything. The chair felt cold beneath Ethan as he lowered himself in front of the screen. The glow of the monitor cast pale shadows across his face, making him appear smaller than he already felt. Around him, the room buzzed with restless anticipation. Everyone leaned closer, waiting for the boy who had dared to step into their circle to falter. Brandon dropped a controller on the table in front of him with a smirk. "Go on then," he said. "Show us what you've got." Ethan picked it up, his palms already slick with sweat. He forced his hands to stay steady, his eyes narrowing at the screen as the game loaded. It was one he knew well, a classic combat strategy that required both speed and foresight. Yet under the weight of those watching eyes, even familiar menus felt foreign. The first match began. The timer ticked, the arena opened, and Ethan's character leapt into the fray. For a few precious seconds, silence filled the room. His movements were precise, his timing sharp. But Brandon, who had taken the opposing side, was relentless. Within minutes, Ethan's focus cracked. A misstep, a missed block, and his character was struck down. Laughter exploded behind him. A boy clapped mockingly, another whistled, as though cheering a pitiful act. Brandon leaned back with a victorious grin. "Pathetic," he said. "I told you. You don't belong here." Ethan's chest tightened. His throat burned as if every jeer sliced deeper than the last. He pressed the controller onto the table, his fingers trembling, his mind a whirl of doubt. The urge to stand, to flee, screamed inside him. But he stayed seated. Because beneath the sting of failure, another voice rose quietly within him. It was the memory of long nights in his father's study, the glow of game designs on the computer, the patient explanations of mechanics and strategies. His father's words echoed, steady and firm. "Every defeat is a lesson. Hold your ground, Ethan. Learn, then strike again." He swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of humiliation. Brandon was already turning away, dismissing him like a broken piece of furniture. The others followed, their interest waning now that the entertainment seemed over. Ethan's fists tightened. He whispered beneath his breath, too low for them to hear. "This isn't over." The fire within him flickered, small but stubborn. He knew something they did not. Something that would one day silence every cruel laugh in this room. And though they had already written him off, the story was only beginning. The following week, Ethan returned to the game club. He carried the same backpack, the same hesitant step, but something in his eyes had changed. The sting of laughter still haunted him, yet so did the memory of his father's steady voice. When he entered, the atmosphere was unchanged. Brandon lounged at the center of the room, surrounded by his loyal group. The moment they spotted Ethan, smirks spread like wildfire. Well, Brandon drawled. "Didn't think you'd come crawling back after that disaster." Ethan ignored the words. He found a seat at the far end of the room, away from the jeering circle. He unpacked his notebook and began to scribble diagrams of game mechanics. The others noticed and laughed again. "Look at him," someone sneered. "Writing notes as if it's homework." But Ethan kept writing. Every mechanic, every shortcut, every strategy that his father had taught him flowed onto the page. To them, he looked like a fool. To Ethan, it was preparation. That evening, when the club was nearly empty, Ethan lingered behind. He sat alone in the dim light of the monitors, his notebook open before him. His fingers traced the patterns of design, the echoes of his father's teachings. He whispered to the silence, "They don't know who built this place. They don't know the truth. Not yet." Nights in Seattle grew longer as autumn deepened. Ethan spent them locked away in his room, a headset over his ears, the glow of the screen illuminating his determined face. His father's voice often guided him, calm and instructive. "Don't rush. Anticipate the move. Think 2 steps ahead." Ethan replayed matches over and over until his fingers moved with instinct. His classmates mocked him daily, but each insult became fuel. Every sneer in the hallway hardened his resolve. By day, he was the outcast of the game club. By night, he was quietly transforming. Sometimes he returned to the club late, when only a few stayed behind. He would practice alone, unnoticed, while his enemies whispered about weekend tournaments. Brandon always won those tournaments. Brandon always claimed the crown. But Ethan watched, listened, and prepared. He learned every flaw in Brandon's strategy, every habit in his timing. Slowly, carefully, he built his own plan. And though no one saw it, Ethan was no longer the boy who trembled on his first day. He was becoming something else entirely. One afternoon, fate shifted. A glitch in the club's schedule left Brandon absent, and the members grew restless, without their leader. Games began without him, and for the first time, Ethan had an opening. A challenge was thrown across the room. "Fine, let the kid play. We need another player anyway." They laughed as Ethan picked up the controller, but their laughter quietened when the match began. His movements were quicker, sharper. His strategy was tighter, refined. He outlasted one opponent, then another. Murmurs spread. "Wait, how did he do that?" By the time the final round ended, Ethan's victory was undeniable. A hush filled the room, broken only by a hesitant clap. No one admitted it aloud, but for the first time, Ethan felt the faint warmth of respect. It wasn't much, just a flicker, but it was enough to tell him he was on the right path. When Brandon returned the next day, whispers of Ethan's performance reached his ears. His expression darkened. He strode across the room, planting himself before Ethan. "Enjoying your little moment?" he sneered. "Don't get used to it." The challenge came quickly. Brandon demanded a match. Ethan accepted, without hesitation. The room fell silent as the two faced off. The screen lit up, the timer began, and the battle roared to life. Brandon's style was aggressive, confident, honed by years of dominance. Ethan fought back with precision, defending, countering, waiting for mistakes. The match stretched on longer than anyone expected. Brandon's smirk faded as sweat formed at his brow. For the first time, he realized Ethan was no pushover. Yet in the final seconds, Brandon's ruthless speed overwhelmed Ethan. Victory was his. The room erupted in cheers for their leader. Brandon smirked once more. "You're getting better. But you'll never beat me." Ethan lowered the controller, breathing hard. He had lost, yes. But he had seen something in Brandon's play. A weakness. A rhythm waiting to be broken. And he knew. Next time would be different. Rumors swirled in the following days. Who was Ethan really? How had he improved so quickly? Whispers spread in corridors, speculation growing louder. One evening, as the club prepared for an inter-school competition, the door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, confident, with eyes that carried both warmth and wisdom. It was Ethan's father. Conversations died instantly. Chairs scraped as every student turned. Some recognized him immediately. He was not just Ethan's father. He was Daniel Miller, one of the most respected game designers in Washington, a man whose name had shaped much of the very club they were sitting in. Brandon's smirk vanished. The others gasped in disbelief. Ethan stood, his voice steady. "You mocked me for being here, but you never knew the truth. My father designed this club. He built the systems you play on, the strategies you worship. And he taught me everything I know." Silence pressed down like a heavy curtain. Revelation rippled through the club like thunder. Members who had once laughed at Ethan now looked at him with wide eyes. Brandon clenched his jaw, fury burning beneath his skin, but even he could not hide the flicker of doubt in his gaze. Daniel Miller spoke calmly. "This club was created to inspire, to welcome everyone who loves games, not to humiliate them. If you mock a player for being new, you miss the very point of why this place exists." His words struck like arrows. No one dared respond. Ethan looked around the room. The balance had changed. For the first time, he was no longer the outcast. He was someone they respected, or at least feared to underestimate. The inter-school competition arrived. The air in the club was tense, filled with anticipation. Ethan and Brandon were both chosen to represent their team. It was inevitable. As the tournament unfolded, Ethan's skills shone. Round after round, he climbed the ranks, his strategies flawless. Brandon, too, crushed his opponents with ruthless speed. The path was clear. The final match would be between them. The arena buzzed with energy as their names were announced. Ethan sat at his station, calm but determined. Brandon glared across the stage, his pride burning like fire. The match began. Every move was sharp, every counter perfectly timed. The crowd roared as the battle stretched longer than any had expected. Brandon's aggression clashed with Ethan's patience. Every time Brandon attacked, Ethan defended and struck back. Every time Ethan faltered, he recovered stronger. Minutes turned into an eternity. At last, the final blow landed. The screen flashed the winner's name. It was Ethan. The room erupted in cheers. Brandon sat frozen, his pride shattered. The club members rushed around Ethan, congratulating him, voices filled with awe. For once, their laughter was not mocking. It was genuine. Ethan lifted his head, meeting his father's gaze in the crowd. Daniel nodded, a proud smile curving his lips. The journey had been long, filled with humiliation, doubt, and relentless practice. But now, Ethan stood not just as a player, not just as the son of a designer, but as someone who had earned his place. The game club was no longer the same. The boy they had mocked was now their champion. And though the scars of ridicule remained, they had become the foundation of something greater. In the heart of Seattle, under the shadow of maple trees and autumn skies, a new chapter had begun.